This is an art collage novel video. I made this series so you guys can experience the story faster. The video will focus on the character's psychology, the images are for illustration purposes only. At this moment, nearly half of the sea race's people had been killed after the fire beast's attack and the fire sparrow's self-destruction. However, there were still nearly 20,000 people left. They gathered together and came over in a mighty manner. How should we attack this time? Ning Huaishu asked. After receiving the news from Baicheng City, Ning Huaishu also became cautious. The skyscraping city had 5 major restriction trump cards, but now they were somewhat restrained and did not dare to act rashly. If the war was really going to spread across the entire coastline, the skyscraping city would definitely be the strongest city on the east coastline. It would be of great significance, and they could not afford to lose it. Why don't you let us do it? Hong Juanhuan asked. It's just 20,000 people, and there's not even a single Nine Heavens martial sovereign. Although it'll take some effort to kill them, it's just like cutting radishes. No, Zhuangsheng said. You're the absolute high-end power of the giant city. Once our strength is exposed, the consequences will be unimaginable. In my opinion, let's let some of the level 1 squads and all the level 2 and 3 squads fight. We'll just treat it as a training session. That's good, Ning Huaishu said. We can let them hone themselves more to deal with more difficult situations in the future. The order was quickly passed down, and a large number of sect disciples also set out. There were also some martial supreme level itinerant cultivators who were organized into level 1 teams of 5. Their abilities were even stronger than the sect's teams, so they were kept as trump cards. Only 8 teams were selected from each sect's team, making up a total of 20 martial supreme powerhouses. As soon as the city gate tower's restriction was opened, everyone soared into the sky. More than 2,000 people were densely distributed in the surroundings, each of them with cold eyes, waiting in battle formation. Behind the sea tribe, Guangqing stared coldly into the distance and said, "What, has this giant city used up all its trump cards? Do we need those human beings to do it themselves?" The ancient lizard commander said the fire giant's aura was huge. It must have required a lot of resources. However, it was restrained by the self-destruction of some of its clansmen. The humans must have felt that it was not worth it to use that kind of restriction again. It's impossible for such a magnificent city to only have one restriction, Guangqing said indifferently. They must be keeping a trump card. However, from the looks of it, even if he had a trump card, he would not have many. Because the human race's numbers are too small, it's hard to make up for the losses, but they'd rather send out martial artists to fight. Does this mean that the strength of the entire city is about the same? Commander Jiao asked. The ancient lizard commander rolled its eyes at him and said, "What, you want to go over and attack? If we know the enemy's background, what's wrong with attacking them head-on?" Commander Jiaoha said. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Guangqing, as if the previous failures had already made them unable to bear it and they wanted to vent their dissatisfaction. Guangqing's eyes swept across the room, and a cold smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Let's just wait. I want to take down this city without any mistakes, and there is no room for failure. Lord Guangqing, with our strength, we're basically safe. Summoning the deep-sea giant beast is just adding flowers to a brocade, Jiaha's commander could not help but say. Guangqing placed his hands behind his back and said indifferently, "It doesn't matter if a few more deep-sea monsters die, but you can't afford to lose them. Now, the entire East Coast is mobilizing the army, and a large-scale war will break out at the first touch. Almost all the experts in the nearby sea region are in my hands. Not only do I want to take this city without a mistake, but I also want to become the core of the war in the entire eastern region. I can't do without you." Everyone's bodies trembled as they hurriedly replied, "Yes." Guangqing waved his hand. "Let the 3 of them do it. It's better than I expected. At least it won't be so boring." On the skyscraping city, a square platform protruded from a corner of the city wall, on which lay a large golden bronze drum, which glowed slowly under the sun. There were 4 martial emperor powerhouses standing guard around the war drum. They sat cross-legged in the air and cultivated with their eyes closed. Suddenly, a ray of light fell and turned into the figure of a martial artist. The four martial emperor powerhouses were shocked and said, "Greetings, Lord Xiaochu." This person was Zhang Xiaochu, one of the 5 hallmasters of the Four Extremes sect. He grabbed in the air, and the battle drum glowed with silver light. In an instant, it absorbed most of the spiritual qi in the surroundings. The surface of the drum emitted a white light, and a golden shadow appeared on it, growing larger and larger. Bang! A ray of golden light shot up and shook the drum. The golden shadow suddenly broke out of the drum. It was a drumstick that was more than 10 meters long. It kept spinning in the air, creating a strong field energy with the war drum. The gold and silver light affected each other. "Are we going to use the Great Desolation drum?" one of the martial emperor powerhouses asked in shock. Every time there was an enemy signal, the drum would sound 3 times in a row, but it was only lightly hit by the 4 guards. "But use 1/10 of its power," Zhang Xiaochu said. "Let's make the Sea tribe suffer a little." His left hand formed a seal and his right hand reached toward the air. The golden drumstick was pulled by his suction force and slowly flew down. However, the silver light on the surface of the drum was so bright that it felt as if it was being pulled away from its flesh and bone. All of a sudden, a silver light shot out from the surface of the drum and headed toward the golden drumstick, trying to take it back. Humph! Zhang Xiaochu snorted coldly and immediately cast a spell with his left hand. A golden light shot toward the silver light and hit back into the drum, making a dull sound. The suction force of the golden drum stick suddenly reduced. Zhang Xiaochu held it in his hand and poured his essence force into it. Beams of golden light bloomed and danced in the air. The 4 martial sovereigns around him were shocked. They knew the power of the Great Desolate War Drum. They had tried to summon the drumsticks, but none of them succeeded. Zhang Xiaochu held the golden drumstick, jumped up, and hit the war drum hard. Bang! An earth-shaking sound rang out, and a silver light burst out from the back of the war drum. It turned into a golden wave that swept toward the oceanic species experts that were surging toward the city. The faces of the members of the Sea tribe in front of him changed drastically. They stopped and used all kinds of ultimate skills. All of a sudden, they were all colorful and smashed into the silver wave. Bang! Bang! Most of the attacks were like ants trying to shake a tree. They all exploded under the silver wave. His entire body was also penetrated by the wave, and he lost his life with one move. Only a few powerful members of the Sea tribe in the 8 desolate territory were able to break through the silver waves and form a layer of defense around their bodies to save their lives. The silver waves were obstructed by a powerful force and pushed forward in the air for a distance before finally disappearing. A large number of corpses of the Sea tribe fell to the ground. The warriors in the sky above the giant city all shouted. Bang! Another drumbeat spread out, and immediately, a large number of Sea race members fell one after another. However, all of them were on guard. Moreover, those who charged at the front and hadn't died were all powerful existences. This time, they quickly annihilated the silver wave. Zhang Xiaochu frowned, and a cold look flashed in his eyes. Several runes flew out of the golden drumstick in his hand, forming a group of patterns in the air, and then he hit the war drum. Boom! The sound this time was different from the previous 2. A sound wave turned into a rainbow and flew up from the drum. It turned into a vast chi of the cloud sea and rushed toward the Sea race. Woo-woo! Suddenly, the melodious sound of a conch rang out in the distance, as if it was calling for something in the twilight sea. Then, the sound of conch shell rang out, rising and falling one after another. It was low and followed a certain rhythm. The cloud-like drum sounds were blocked by an invisible force all of a sudden. Unable to advance any further, they dissipated in the air outside the city. Zhang Xiaochu's expression changed abruptly, showing a trace of anger. He was about to activate the power of the war drum again when he suddenly heard an order, calling him back. His face twitched, and he snorted coldly. He threw the drumstick away unwillingly, turned around, and flew away from the drum stand. The drumstick immediately turned into a ray of golden light and flew into the Great Desolation drum. The entire battle drum became quiet and the spiritual energy fluctuations on it disappeared. The four martial emperor powerhouses who were guarding the city looked at each other and fixed their eyes on the outside of the city. They looked extremely worried. Along with the sound of the conch, there was a hua-hua sound in the sky, as if they had returned to the sea. All the members of the Sea clan felt their blood burning. Their auras rose to the peak as they roared and rushed forward. Zhang Xiaochu returned to the spectator stand and said angrily, "Why did Lord Huaishu ask me to stop? It's better to directly summon the desolate ancient barbarian sound and kill all these sea race members." Ning Huaishu said indifferently, "We have strong opponents, so does the other party? Since they've already retaliated with the conch sound, we'll stop for the time being. I don't want this attack to escalate, so that we won't be able to achieve our purpose of training them." "That's right." Hong Juanhuan nodded. "We paid a lot of money to summon these martial artists to kill the enemies. If we have to do everything, what's the point of having them?" Zhang Xiaochu snorted coldly and crossed his arms in front of his chest. He didn't say anything. The warriors in the sky-towering city were already waiting for the sound of the conch sound. When they saw the sound of the drum being extinguished and the Sea Tribe's experts rushing within hundreds of meters, they all shouted and rushed out. "Kill the enemy in groups," Yunxiao said in a deep voice. "Don't be too far apart, and look out for each other. Don't stretch the battlefront of the whole team too long." "Yes." Everyone responded, including Liang Yuanji. Their boiling blood calmed down. Killing the enemy was important, but staying alive was more important. The 2,000 human warriors rushed out and instantly drowned in the Sea Tribe warriors. Their numbers were almost 10 times that of the human warriors. Under the impact, many human warriors died. The entire battlefield continued to expand, and a steady stream of Sea Tribe warriors rushed in. Yunxiao was still holding an 8th-tier saber in his hand, and his strength was suppressed to the level of an 8-stars martial supreme. However, each slash killed a Sea clan expert, and it was impossible for them to avoid his attacks. Moreover, he had specifically chosen the enemy's high-level martial venerables to kill and left the weaker ones to his own teammates. In just a few breaths' time, he had killed more than 10 high-level martial venerables and rushed into the enemy's camp. "Lord Feiyang," Liang Yuanji shouted, "don't drag the battle line too long." The members of the Battle Blade team were shocked by Shifeng's bravery and strength. At the same time, they began to worry for him. "Mind your own business," Yunxiao said indifferently. "I'll take care of you." The members of the Battle Blade team were all stunned, but they soon revealed bitter smiles. With his strength, he indeed had the right to say such words. Although the Sea Tribe warriors who had been filtered by Yunxiao were still large in number, the small team was able to kill more than 10 of them in a few moves, and their mission was considered completed. The crowd in the spectator stand quietly looked down. The entire battle was under their control. Once the situation changed, they would immediately take action. After all, almost all the teams were gathered here, and they could not afford to make any mistakes. Is that masked warrior really only an 8-star martial supreme? He had been looking at the entire battlefield, but he soon found that Yunxiao was almost unparalleled. No matter whether his opponent was a peak martial honor or a very strong shell, he was killed with one strike, without exception. Liao Yangbing's heart skipped a beat and he started to worry. "I also feel that there is something wrong with this young man. Although his yuan power is indeed that of an 8-star martial supreme, his blade technique is extremely ruthless and accurate. It secretly contains supreme blade intent, so he can easily kill the enemies of a 9-star martial supreme." "But that's not a problem," Fu Ichuan said seriously. "The problem is that he's killed almost 100 people, but the elemental energy fluctuations from his body haven't weakened at all." Liao Yangbing put on a fake smile and said, "Then, this person must be a peak martial honor or a martial emperor in disguise. This has happened before. It's not a bad thing." Zhuangxing nodded. Everyone has their own thoughts. Since he wants to hide his strength, it's understandable. If he can survive the war, then Yunruo's reward will be based on the rank of a martial supreme. Fu Ichuan nodded. "That's true. The courage he had when he killed the Ghost Eel commander, as well as the military merits he has displayed now, can be given in excess. Even those martial sovereigns aren't as nimble as him. Hong Juanhuan's pupils constricted and he suddenly said, "Don't you think he's too quick?" After killing dozens of people, the martial supreme powerhouses in the level 1 team obviously don't have enough origin power. They have to use the second or even the third move when facing a peak martial honor. Under the siege of several peak martial honors, they were trapped again and again, and it was difficult for them to win. However, this person still kills them with one slash, as if he was chopping radishes. So what? Zhang Xiaochu asked. It only means that his true strength is above that of an ordinary martial supreme. Everyone nodded, and Hong Juanhuan did not say anything else. Liao Yongbing breathed a sigh of relief. If these people found out Yunxiao's identity, he would probably die a terrible death on the spot. How could Yunxiao not know that he would arouse suspicion if he killed the enemies like this? But, the more the Sea tribe surrounded him, the more angry he was. The more he killed, the heavier the murderous aura on his body, and the more excited he was. Keep your heart and don't be possessed by the devil, the demonic dragon suddenly reminded. Humph. Yunxiao snorted coldly and said, "I've refined the devil a long time ago. How can he be possessed by the devil?" "The devil is born from the heart," the demon dragon said. "When did you refine the devil in your heart?" "Pfft, don't gossip with me. These sea people are really hateful," Yunxiao said angrily. "They don't even hesitate to start a war between two races for a rainbow stone. In that case, I don't need to be polite when I kill them." "You're the one who should be blamed," the demon dragon scolded. "You took someone else's things and you still blame them for coming to our door?" "If the rainbow stone is a dead object," Yunxiao said, "I can return it to them. But now she has already turned into a living person and has swallowed my eggerine, how can I return it?" Within a few telepathic exchanges, another dozen Sea tribe members had died under his blade. Those who were low-level revered martial artists and below had basically been killed with a single slash. The members of the Sea tribe around him also went crazy. Their eyes were red, and they didn't use their unique skills. Instead, they roared and rushed up to self-destruct. Humph. Yunxiao snorted coldly as he threw the saber away and stood in the air. The saber kept flying in the air and opened around him. A ray of saber light bloomed in all directions. Bang. 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 Before those self-destructing members of the Sea tribe could reach the light, they were slashed and exploded in the air. All kinds of explosions were heard. Although the Sea tribe was not afraid of death, their suicidal behavior, which was like a moth darting into the fire, still terrified them. After the saber spun several times and fell back into Yunxiao's hand, all of them retreated, and no one dared to step forward. A cold look flashed across Yunxiao's face as he continued to approach the Sea tribe. With a whoosh, the Sea tribe members actually retreated to both sides to make way for him, which surprised Yunxiao. Looking at the members of the Sea tribe who were trembling in fear, the killing intent in his eyes suddenly disappeared, and his mind calmed down. Although he was a foreign race, although his intelligence was not high, although he was courageous, he was still a living creature. Who would not be afraid of death? Who would be willing to die in such a cowardly manner? However, the two races had no choice in the battle. Yunxiao did not continue to chase after them, but began to turn back with a cold look on his face. With a wave of his saber, several people screamed and died. It was as if he had returned to the past, when he had killed countless experts in the 8,000 miles of sea. The pressure on the members of the Battle Blade team suddenly increased after Yunxiao had gone far away. They were surrounded by a large number of sea people, and the battle circle gradually shrank. Their eyes were spitting fire, and they could no longer tell whose blood was on their bodies. There was only a kill in their minds. Chen Zhongwei's face was even more ferocious. He wanted to settle all the old and new grudges together. His entire body was filled with violent emotions. He wanted to rush up and bite these Sea tribe members to pieces. Hiss. Just as he was surrounded by two martial honors of similar strength and was in danger, two rays of light suddenly flashed past and the two martial honors were cut in half and fell from the sky. Blood splattered all over his face, and in his shock, he saw Yun Xiao, who had an indifferent look on his face. Lord Feiyang, Chanqian. Although Chen Zhongwei knew that Yun Xiao's strength was extraordinary, his performance was a little too shocking, and he was stunned for a moment. Yun Xiao did not even look at him. He just said indifferently, "Don't die." The saber radiance streaked across once again and attacked the other members of the Sea tribe who were besieging the small team. Chen Zhongwei's heart warmed. He quickly looked around and immediately retreated to the battle circle of the Battle Blade team. With Yun Xiao's return, the pressure on everyone was greatly reduced, and they all breathed a sigh of relief. The entire battle ring became smaller and smaller, and a large number of corpses piled up below. Everyone in the spectator stands was pale. Their hands were stained with blood, but this was the first time they had experienced such a bloodthirsty battle. Hot blood surged in their bodies, and they wanted to rush out and kill the enemy. There was only one person. As more and more people died, the expression on his face became more and more excited, and he couldn't help but lick his lips. Zhuangsheng turned around and glanced at him. "Chikage-sama, is that enough?" "Kiki." Duan Qianyu stuck out his long tongue and licked his lower lip. He laughed eerily. His voice sent chills down everyone's spine and they could not help but look disgusted. The martial artists beside him snorted coldly and walked away, not wanting to get too close to him. Duan Qianyu didn't care about the crowd's expressions. He laughed and said, "It's almost done, a little more would be better." This trip wasn't in vain. I'm really looking forward to the war escalating. Ning Huishu's face was also pale, and he felt like retching, but he still forced a smile and said, "Since Chikage-sama likes this kind of scene, why don't you send more people over?" No. Duan Qianyu shook his head, his eyes shining. "I can't even have enough of these vengeful souls and malicious ghosts for myself, how can I let others have a share? Unless the war escalates and hundreds of powerhouses at your level die, that would be more like it." If hundreds of high-level martial sovereigns die, the entire eastern region will basically fall, Zhuangsheng said with a bitter smile. Duan Qianyu let out a strange laugh. If there are 100 vengeful souls of high-level martial sovereigns, I can refine a heaven-class golden soul. I can avenge you all. The rest of the people were all upset, but no one was willing to provoke the experts of the Soul Devourer sect. Moreover, they were all on the same side now. The more abnormal and powerful this person was, the more beneficial it would be for them. Thus, they all turned their heads away and ignored him. Duan Qianyu laughed for a while, then stopped when he realized that it was boring. He looked outside and licked his lips more and more frequently with his long tongue. He kept sucking his saliva. It's almost time. Just as everyone's hair stood on end from the sound of their saliva being sucked in, and they were almost at their limit, Duan Qianyu laughed out loud, turned into a ray of light, and rushed out. His figure appeared in the sky and looked coldly at the battlefield. He threw out a soul-devouring banner and directly launched it in the air, growing larger and larger. The long silk was fluttering in the air. The strange black symbols on it flew out and circled in the air. Gradually, they formed a small black formation. The power on it suddenly dispersed. The entire sky darkened in an instant, as if night had fallen. There was no light at all. Everyone's heart trembled as they looked up in horror. They didn't know where the martial artist had shown his remarkable power, but he could actually change the phenomenon of heaven and earth. When the human powerhouses saw who it was, although they didn't know who it was, they at least knew that it was a human. They were overjoyed and cheered as if they had seen their savior. Yun Xiao's eyes narrowed. He naturally knew that it was someone from the Soul Devourer sect, so he said indifferently, "The moment this person makes his move, the battle will end. Everyone, be careful." The members of the Battle Blade team were stunned. Since it was an expert from their side, what did it mean to be careful? "This man is from the Soul Devourer sect," Yun Xiao explained. "Once they start eating souls, they don't distinguish between friend and foe, and only care about their own pleasure. Now that the two races are at war, Red Moon City should restrain him and not act too rashly, but we still have to be careful. If he accidentally eats your soul, I don't think Red Moon City will seek justice for you. When everyone heard this, they immediately felt a chill in their hearts and their heads began to ache.